Good morning and welcome to the Value of Space Partnerships for Brands. If you have questions for the speakers during the session, please enter them into the chat function and then I'll go ahead and make sure that the speakers get them. And so now we are pleased to welcome our moderator, Trisha Navadazet, Principal and Head of Corporate Partnerships at the Space Marketing Group.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Trisha, and I'm delighted to be your host today. It seems like every few weeks or every few months these days, we hear about another brand or commercial consumer brand that is investing in a space partnership. Most recently, we heard about Tom Cruise shooting a movie on board the ISS. These space and brand partnerships are becoming almost common, and they're garnering worldwide audiences and attention. Our panel discussion today is premised around the value of these space and brand partnerships, and we have an exciting panel of guests that will share with us their expertise into this trending and current subject matter. We're going to dive into some of the brand partnerships the International Space Station, U.S. National Laboratory is working on, including their process. We're going to dive into the storytelling of space content with an Emmy Award-winning aerospace production company. And last but not least, we have a very well-known brand here with us today with firsthand experience and partnerships that could potentially be incredibly vital to our success in and on the way to Mars. And so you won't want to miss today's panel discussion, especially if you're a brand that is looking to see how you can participate in this new domain and perhaps why you should. If you're an investor and entrepreneur that is looking to develop a space-related return on investment model, and even if you're an aerospace company or an engineer that's wondering if you should develop a commercial program, channel, or asset for partnerships offerings. With that being said, I'm pleased to introduce you to our panel guests today. Christine Kretz, Vice President, Programs and Partnerships at the International Space Station, U.S. National Laboratory. Jay Nemeth, aerospace cinematographer and CEO of Flightline Films.
Good morning.
And Mark Fernandez, America's HPC Technology Officer and Principal Investigator for Spaceborne Computer 2 at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Welcome, everyone.
Good morning.
Christine, I'd love to jump and dive in immediately with you on two of the most well-known brands in the world. Essentially, they're household name brands, Adidas and Budweiser. Adidas recently, in the last couple of years, has taken its Boost shoe technology off the ground and into space, you might say, to help improve products for athletes around the world. Adidas has partnered with the ISS National Labs to explore the boundaries of product innovation. And then Budweiser just launched its barley seeds into space. It's the fourth in a series of experiments meant to test how the seeds germinate in microgravity. The company says it aims to be the first to brew beer on Mars. Can you elaborate on the value propositions of these partnerships for Adidas, Budweiser, and for the ISS National Laboratory?
Sure, Tricia, thank you. I'm happy to talk about both of these. They're great partners to work with, and this is a fun question. So let's start with Budweiser. I applaud their goal to be the first beer on Mars, because we will all need our creature comforts when we get to the moon and we get to Mars. So good for a company for thinking ahead about how they're going to position themselves. But they started with us to work on the actual science and investigation of a plant species, barley, that is a common cereal crop on Earth, and the investigation included some understanding of how it works in microgravity that could improve the production of the barley on Earth as well. So it's a winning kind of experiment. You mentioned that they've done a number of their experiments, both kind of gene expression, seed exposure, recently malting efforts. So it's real science. They're really trying to research. It's not simply a branding opportunity, but it's certainly a science that then supports a branding statement and supports a communication about what their efforts are. So Budweiser is pushing the boundaries of what we've done in space and plants, and there are a number of plant experiments. And then also capitalizing on the fact that they're a space age product. They're pushing the envelope, and that makes for a good brand story. And I think we're happy to support them in that way, because it's a win-win. If you are doing research and you can capitalize on that for your brand to show that you're really, pushing the areas of knowledge that we have in a design for research, that's certainly something that makes for a good brand story. Adidas is also delightful to work with. They truly are working in a technology development platform, which they help to invent with an implementation partner. So how do you do this research in space? It's not like in your lab here on Earth because of the microgravity, and they had to design a whole new set of hardware to test their midsole to see if they could make improvements. So it truly is a research effort. But then the marketing side was, if you have photographs in space of this wonky contraption that doesn't really look like a shoe because it's an experimental midsole, it's not giving you necessarily the photo op for the commercial of your shoe. So they also used an allocation that NASA makes available to take some photos of the shoe in space to show it in a commercial way. So the research compounded with the commercial storytelling is kind of their marketing story. And again, it's a materials test. It's meant to give them insights into the technology, but they also really want to make an impact with their customers. So they also took some additional photos of the full shoe as it kind of floated around the cupola. The relationships that we have in the National Lab are strong and ongoing. You mentioned Budweiser. They didn't do one project to see what they found. They did a series of projects to really understand fully what they would need to know, and see how they could improve a product. And we also assisted them with our communications and marketing tools, with blogs, with NASA's ability to take photos in the station of the research, so that we could really add the value that they wanted. And we continue to work with both Budweiser and Adidas because it's a long-term relationship for us.
That's fantastic. Very, very well-known brands. And another really well-known brand is Red Bull. And Jay, I want to jump over to you. You won an Emmy for your work on the Red Bull Stratus project in 2012. For some of you folks out there that hadn't heard of it, it was where Felix Baumgartner ascended to the stratosphere in a helium balloon, jumped, and then became the first person to break the speed of sound in a free fall. I watched it live. I know almost everyone watched that live. Mm-hmm. This project garnered worldwide attention, and I think it was partly due to the fact that it was streamed live. It was almost like, watching, an Apollo mission in the modern day. What did you learn in regards to how powerful and or valuable space content is to a brand like Red Bull, but more specifically, the live streaming of the mission to viewers at home? Like, how valuable is this content to a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. The live streaming of the event was key to our entire approach to the camera system. We had several objectives we had to meet. One was gathering digital cinematography for documentaries or possible IMAX films later, stills. But really, the live event was, the driving force behind it. And so that was the focus of a lot of our camera designs and technology was to make sure that those systems worked and that the world could see the event live. We joked that if he ended up jumping and nobody watched it, what was the point of doing it? So for Red Bull, that was a key thing. And, I think it certainly exceeded everybody's expectations. We knew that it would be unique and that it would be engaging to a lot of people. But I was so surprised to hear, teachers tell me afterwards, I stopped my class and I turned on the TV so that the students could watch this. And I was really surprised. I hate to draw comparisons between Red Bull and the Apollo missions because the Apollo missions were so amazing and so significant for mankind. But, the space shuttle had retired the year before in 2011. And I think there's a part of most people that will always gauge our technological achievements by what we're doing in space. And so that was the country's and the world's space moment, was this jump, and it had all the elements of good TV. Somebody's life was on the line. It was visually striking to see this man standing on the step of a capsule and jumping, and world records were broken, and it set many records. I think it may still hold a record on YouTube with 8.5 million concurrent views. 52 million people watched it, I think within 24 hours of it happening. And so the benefits to the brand were amazing. It, increased sales by 13% the following year, and really identified Red Bull as one of those companies that could think outside of the box and come up with something that was engaging and powerful and was much more than just what some people would call a PR or media stunt.
Jay, did you guys think that that many people were gonna watch the Red Bull Stratus live stream? Did you think that it was gonna have as much you know, media coverage? I mean, what did you guys think initially that it was gonna look like?
Yeah, I'd like to say that we knew, but we really didn't. And it was actually, we were fortunate because, we attempted the launch 4 days earlier and there was a gust of wind that destroyed the balloon. And what we found out was that at around 2 million views, all of the cybersecurity software for YouTube had kicked in, because we were looking at the viewership and it had gone up, and then it hit 2 million and flatlined. And we were like, that's strange. Like, I don't think that represents the real viewership. And it turns out they had never had that many people tune in to a show. I think the next closest thing was 500,000 for an Olympics event. And so luckily that aborted launch allowed them to identify this problem. They put more servers online and I think removed some of the cybersecurity. So that everybody, could tune in. And even then at the 8.5 million, a lot of people reported that they had trouble getting on. The numbers may have been much greater, but nothing like that had ever been done before. And I don't think we really knew how this event was going to resonate with people and how, and how popular it would be. It was carried on 82 different networks in 50 countries. And it was just astonishing. And I think it was kind of a wake up for us and for brands on, wow, the potential for this type of thing for an ad campaign that takes place in space is just unbelievable.
Thank you for that. I'm going to switch over to Mark. Welcome, Mark. Great to have you. When I learned about the Hewlett Packard Enterprise's spaceborne computer to the ISS, I thought I was living in the future in some sci-fi movie. I mean, it's pretty it's like space geek heaven, right? And so just to give the audience a little bit of background on it, So as part of a year-long experiment with NASA to test how well a supercomputer can operate under the harsh conditions of space, Hewlett-Packard launched a spaceborne computer to the ISS. The idea was that the future missions to Mars will require sophisticated computing capabilities, and to cut down on communication latencies and ensure astronaut survival, a supercomputer aboard the spacecraft could mitigate those issues and eliminate the need to rely on Earth. And what that means is basically there's a 20-minute lag to get data transmission from spacecrafts back to Earth, and having a supercomputer on board mitigates that, and that's a really big deal. You know, what motivated Hewlett-Packard Enterprise to participate in this experiment? What was the primary value propositions of this partnership with the ISS that made you guys invest your time and resources into space exploration, Mars, and all that fun stuff?
Wow. Well, first off, thank you for having me. And that is a great introduction and a great summary. So thank you for doing that. It's got sort of a two-part question there. One is first what got us into it, and then the value proposition. Well, NASA Ames Research Center is one of our longest and largest customers, and they have as part of their mission to support space exploration. They're not a flight center, but they do flight center modeling and simulation. So that's why they need the large computers. Excuse me. 7 years ago, the visionaries at NASA Ames came to us and said, "You've been doing a great job with us on the supercomputers here on Earth. But as we look ahead to our mission, when we get to the moon or to the Mars, like you alluded, the communications is not going to allow us to continue to do our mission. So would you take a small part of our current supercomputer and see if you can get it to work in space?" So at the highest level, that's really three things you have to do first. Number one, you need to package it up so that it can survive the shake, rattle, and roll of launch. Number two, you've got to get astronauts to install it and bring it up and get it online. Not something they typically do. It's something that we have specialized people here on Earth that go into your data centers and do that for you. And thirdly, could we operate it? And if we were able to operate it, did it give us the right answers? And how long would it give us the right answers? So just to be clear, this computer is not for navigation, it's not for communications, it's not for anything having to do with the flight of the spacecraft. It is really there for the scientists and engineers that we'll have at Mars and on the moon to continue their work. So the first part is our motivation was we're customer first oriented, and our customer asked us to do that, and that was NASA. So pretty exciting project. Of course, we agreed to it and we jumped onto it. So secondly, you asked about the value prop, and I think that's probably a two-part answer. The first part is the purpose of exploration, wherever that happens to be, in space or on Earth or underwater or anywhere, is really insight. It's not data collection. All of that begins with the data collection, and the data collected has to be processed in a computer. And so we want to be that computer in space that is used to process the data that you collect in space, on the moon, and at Mars. Secondly, and this is a more near-term motivation, I have the tagline, proven in space, available on Earth. So we've had many customers come to us and say, we didn't realize your gear was that durable. If you can operate that thing in space, you can probably operate it on my oil rig, on my deep mine, on my high-speed train. So all of the harsh environment that we encountered in space resonates with people here on Earth. So we want to be the first ones in space, and we want to focus on that space computing for scientists and engineers. But again, that helps humanity and all of our researchers here on Earth. So those are our two motivations. I appreciate that opening question. Thank you.
I'm just curious, how big is this computer? Like in my mind, when I think of a supercomputer, I think it's super big, like Super Texas or something. How big is it actually? What's the size of it?
So let me give you a relative comparison. Our supercomputer, Spaceborne 1, on the International Space Station performed 1 trillion calculations per second. Okay? And we did that 20 years after the world saw the first computer ever to do 1 trillion calculations. The first computer ever to do 1 trillion calculations was over 100 racks. And those are about the size of a refrigerator. So imagine 100 refrigerators. We were able to do that in less than 1/4 of a rack. So in 20 years, you can see how the technology advances. Those visionaries at NASA Ames are looking at their hundreds of racks that they use today to do their mission, but what will we have available in 10 years or 20 years to take to Mars? So they asked us to take a small part of their computer, the exact same components, etc., and we did so. And it was about 1/4 of a rack. Actual dimensions are about 1 foot tall, about 3 feet wide, and about 2 feet deep.
So it's a pretty fairly sized computer. It's not just like a computer, like, you know, a tiny chip. It's a real life computer.
No, it's not a Raspberry Pi. It's not a laptop. It's not an iPad. It is a serious workhorse, high performance computer that we sell presently to customers all around the world today.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Really a space geek fantasy, this supercomputer.
Yes, indeed.
So I would love to jump back to Christine, if I could find Christine in the virtual world. And I want to open up with kind of going on the other side of the spectrum. In some cases, a lot of brand partnerships in space are not as clearly defined immediately or viewed as an overnight success. Sometimes we'll see a project on TV and we'll think, is this another space junk project? Like, you know, we kind of question the validity of it. Sometimes these brands, though, have a bigger picture vision for their space adventures, and those big visions could take years to unfold into those, you know, wow moments that, you know, Red Bull Stratus or the Beer in Space projects or the supercomputer kind of gives us. And so, Christine, I'd love to start with you on a very recent project. In 2019, NASA, in a live press conference, announced that it had opened the International Space Station to marketing partnerships, which pretty much meant these are partnerships that did not have to have an experiment element, you know, attached to them. So these marketing partnerships would be on the ISS, and the ISS would dedicate NASA would dedicate about 5% of each payload to the ISS for purely marketing purposes. So 5% of a payload to the ISS is about the size of a shoebox. That's pretty much what I'm guessing. So it's not very much. An example that was really, like, I think a couple weeks ago, of a shoebox, you know, marketing payload was Estee Lauder. They sent cosmetic products to the ISS to shoot an in-orbit space commercial. Can you share with us a bit about, you know, what this partnership entailed, and elaborate on the how and if Estee Lauder plans to further invest in space-related activities, and for what purpose?
I'm happy to talk about this. This is another fun question, Tricia. I appreciate it. Estee Lauder is a company that's a great example of hearing about a commercial opportunity, said, how can we use that? And as a brand, that's a great question to ask yourself. The 5% allocation is small. It is about the size of a shoebox. It also is not taken away from the ISS National Lab allocation. So Mark still gets to do his research with us. We're not trimming off on HP's science research by doing this 5%. But we're excited that NASA has created this opportunity for use of solely a commercial moment. And Tom Cruise is bigger than a shoebox. So he's going to be bigger than a 5% allocation, but that is also truly another version of a commercial in space thing that attracts attention and pulls people toward the fact that space is available for our use. What's exciting for me is I'm out there looking for partners in research, teams like HP and Mark's team working with my team to put their research in space, but we often have partners who have some need to do something commercially. I mentioned that Adidas was doing their project, but that doesn't look like a shoe, so taking pictures of it doesn't really capture it the right way for their commercial. So having a 5% payload allows us to have NASA take pictures of it, fly it around in space. Estee Lauder went right for the let's do something fun and market with it. Let's do a social media campaign, and they made arrangements to do that. That is something that they fund. So let me be clear. NASA has a payload costing matrix. You put in your submission, they figure out the costing, and you do pay for flying. It's not a free ticket. And then they take the photos and do what you need to do and bring your payload back so that you can simply tell a great marketing story in that way. And that's what Estee Lauder is doing. But I think a lot of companies are doing kind of the best of both worlds. They're going to do research with us, but they also want to have a marketing campaign, and the 5% that NASA allows and supports helps to do that. And the payloads that have been using the 5% so far have come from the National Lab partnerships with brands, supported by NASA's team that's doing commercial work, and it's sort of a 1-2 punch. Yes, we're doing stuff, but if, like Estee Lauder, you don't currently have a research project and you want to jump into some photos, it's an opportunity that was created exactly for that. Let's get a cool thing that we can do in space, which doesn't take quite as much effort as Jay's work to do what all of that was, and imagine the enormous production there. This is a way to get started easily. And Estee Lauder, to get back to them, is a wonderful partner to work with. They have mutual interest to work with us on some science, and we'll be announcing at the beginning of 2020 some research that they're going to sponsor, that they're going to invite participation in. So I love these partnerships where we're both commercial and marketing and also have some science behind it. So that's a win-win, and we're super excited about the availability of that 5%.
I think you might have answered my second question, but I'm just going to ask again, just to clarify. Are there plans for Estee Lauder to scale up their participation in space and go into another phase with the ISS National Labs?
They are. We have an agreement that we're going to kick off some research with them, and we will announce that in the beginning of 2021. So they are looking for a way to do more research and get more insights from having research on the station.
Coincidentally, makeup is something that's pretty important to women. And I think it just makes us feel good. And sometimes a little bit of lipstick can change your mood. It seems like you wouldn't have to change very much.
Mark, you don't know that.
It seems like you wouldn't have to kind of like tailor or change makeup around too much to work in space. I mean, a lipstick can work in space, mascara can work in space. So that's kind of a thought I never had, that you could literally just take your makeup to space and and have a better space day if you're having a challenging day up
You
there.
know, I think that that lipstick wouldn't take up too much room in your personal kit. So maybe that is a thing that our astronauts are happy to have. And I think some of the creature comforts, and not just for our astronauts, and they are heroes to me because of the work that they do. So the work for Mark's team, for example, those are those astronauts who learned how to do what Mark needed them to do to work with his computer. They're really great. They're wonderful to work with. They're wonderful to work with when they're back here and they share their excitement with us. But it's certainly nice that they can have some creature comforts up there in a very tiny can that's floating around over the Earth, whether it's things like pizza because there are ovens, or maybe it's other products. But I'd also say, in a commercial way, it's not very, very soon, this time next year, commercial astronauts, not NASA, but commercial people who wish to go to space and do their own research, will be able to get there. Now that we have SpaceX flying to the station from our shores, now that there are things going on with Axiom, Blue Origin, all of those companies are making access to space really available, which makes for more commercial efforts, but also more need for product in space. So if Budweiser is not wrong that we're getting to a place where there will be people who are populating space, and those comforts of beer or makeup or coffee or whatever it is that you need are going to be part of how people travel. So it's really going to be, it is upon us. It is not far into the future. It is happening now.
And it's all about, taking our lifestyle to space, and then recreating a space lifestyle for ourselves. It's really about creating a new ecosystem up there that we can feel comfortable in.
I don't know about you, but I don't do well without coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I want my, good cup of coffee in the morning. And I know that the ISS actually has an espresso maker, thanks to the Italians. And so those kinds of things have been thought of. There you go. Mark's having, I've got mine here. Those just little things that make your life pleasant are part of things that we can relate to here. And if your brand is talking about how Mark said, if it can work in space, imagine how ruggedized it is here. If it's a good cup of coffee in space, I imagine I want to try it here. So there's a new commercial effort, and I think NASA is trying to really help to move that along by making this 5% allocation possible, by funding the companies that are becoming the commercial vehicles. That's NASA and government public-private partnership to make Blue Origin and SpaceX available. Boeing also has a craft coming. That's public-private partnership to make the access available. And that may mean that Jay can more readily go and do more production in space, and that we can have Tom Cruise do a movie there.
That's fantastic. Jay, I want to switch over to you. I want to talk about a brand that you worked with that is kind of a pretty bold and daring brand, I think. I want to talk to you about Samsung. A few press outlets in 2019 called Samsung's space selfie mission a PR stunt. For the audience, I want to explain what this project was. It involved a photo of a celebrity, Cara Delevingne. I hope I pronounced that correctly. This photo was taken on a Galaxy S10 Plus and was to be the world's first selfie sent to space. And then users could then upload their own photo to a website for a chance to see them displayed on the screen of a Galaxy S10 5G on board this balloon. So this was a balloon project. Send your space selfie to space. I believe that was the project. So in a dramatic plot twist, Samsung's space selfie came back down to Earth a couple days earlier than expected. And the press kind of kind of chowed it down and called it a PR stunt. But it was a pretty bold project in terms of a marketing campaign. Samsung is a big organization. It has board members, shareholders. It took a very big risk in investing in a spacey campaign. And for all of us that kind of work in the space world, we know that space isn't easy. It's not for the lighthearted. They potentially demonstrated that they're a company with some guts, and they were able to take a project that you would have never even thought of, sending a selfie to space, and take a risk with it. I want to know your thoughts on, what do you think Samsung's takeaway was from this project, in terms of some of the bad press they got, as far as being called a press stunt, etc. What was your involvement in the project? And what do you think would motivate them to not give up on space and to continue to participate in space?
Yeah, all good questions. I don't think it's accurate to depict these things as a PR stunt. I think the more daring and the more exciting an advertising campaign is, the more it's going to attract attention. And there's always going to be naysayers, but the truth is, it was a brilliant idea. It was the ad agency at BBH in London that threw out a handful of ideas to Samsung. It was actually Samsung Europe, and Benjamin Braun picked the space selfie idea. And of course, why wouldn't you pick that? I mean, especially for a company that's based in technology, what is the ultimate benchmark for high tech? It's going into space. It's difficult. It requires a lot of technology, and it's exciting. I mean, let's face it, space is sexy. And so, I think it was the natural choice. When we were approached, BBH had also approached two other companies to see, if this was a viable project. It was a very short time frame from the time that they said, yeah, let's go. And this was due to it coinciding with Samsung's 50th anniversary. So there was a deadline to get this done. And, we explored a few different ways to do this. One was, to go to the ISS. What would have been better than to have the, Samsung phone in the window of the cupola? But the timing didn't work out for that. There was also the suborbital, idea to send it up like on a Blue Origin suborbital rocket. Those are 5 to 10 minute flights. And so they already had a benchmark of, so many tens of thousands of pictures that they wanted to send up to this vehicle and then rephotograph and then return back to the Earth. So the high altitude balloon made sense. It's kind of a cost-effective way to get to the edge of space. And, visually, the edge of space looks very similar to, being on orbit. Here's a picture of Felix standing on the edge of the capsule. You can see the atmosphere, and you can see the darkness of space. So it made sense for Samsung to go that route. They interviewed a few different companies. We're kind of in a unique situation in that we have a lot of this hardware and equipment in our inventory and on the shelf, so we can rapidly respond to something like this. Whereas I think the other companies, there was maybe a little bit too much research and development required. But, I think the campaign, went great. Samsung was very pleased with the results. The truth is, on the duration of the flight, because the high altitude balloons are, subject to the winds, we have a little bit of control over how long these missions can last, but a lot of it's weather driven. And, it was challenging, but we took on the project because we knew we could get it done in the time frame. I actually have video I can show. It's real short, that'll give the viewers a little more information on this project.
We first heard about this, I'll be honest, it sounded a little crazy.
We're sending the Samsung Galaxy S10 to space using a high-altitude balloon system.
Users submit their selfie. These are then sent to the flight module where it's displayed on the S10.
It's then photographed, sent back down that communications network back to the users.
It sounds pretty simple.
Is it simple?
It's not simple.
So the S10 is the main processing unit for the whole operation.
It requires basically space qualifying before it can be placed on the payload.
We extensively tested pressure,
Solar radiation.
temperature, operational duration at those conditions.
It required very little modification from us. It's almost as if the phone was designed to operate in space.
Sending a selfie is easy. Sending a space selfie from a developer's standpoint is not as straightforward.
We're in a very extreme environment. Temperatures are going to be around -65 Celsius.
The space selfie payload is going to climb out about 1,000 feet per minute.
It's technically very difficult, but our ethos at Samsung is do what you can. It's never been done before. We're giving people an opportunity to have their face in space.
And so, you know, it was great because I think a lot of people, you know, of course, would love to go to space, you know, but they can't yet. Soon they will. And so this was, you know, a cute and fun way to take a selfie of yourself and you send it, you know, to a portal. We uplinked it to the vehicle. We displayed it on the phone. We rephotographed it in front of the Earth, brought it back, and you know, there was all the feedback was really ecstatic. You know, everybody was really excited about it. So, you know, I think for brands like that can come up with something unique, especially that gives people some sort of access to space, you know, it's really a positive experience. And I would be willing to bet that Samsung will probably, you know, do other projects similar to this.
Fantastic. I hope they do. I hope that they, you know, don't give up on space, because again, they seem like they're a bold company because they did invest in this project. It's pretty fun to even talk about. I want to switch over to, you know, more on a business side, return on investment models, how space can create jobs in America and the world and so on. But before I do that, Mark, I just want to ask you really quick, because there doesn't seem to be any pushback from HPE investing in space, but has there been any negative pushback from, you know, HPE board members, customers, state, you know, anyone on, you know, partnerships in space and investing in the ISS experiments?
So no, we're all in. We can see the market developing. In fact, we've got an actual project to begin next fiscal year, in which we'll have a third party assess, record, and report what they call the total addressable market. And so that's going to help further build the case for HPE being in space. This may be a sensitive analogy, but I've been using it internally. We see an explosion in home office and home office technology because of the COVID virus. Well, I think that we'll see an explosion in typical technology such as HPE computers in space as soon as regular people are regularly able to get there. And HPE is planning on being the computer of choice that we've proven in space for you to use when you get there.
That takes me to my next question. How does HPE's space program, we'll call it, how does it create jobs on Earth for Hewlett Packard?
Oh, a very good question. So it really is a two-part effort. Uh, we've been alluding to it all day, and that's the marketing. You know, I think Jay alluded to your technology is really cool if you can put it in space, and customers open the doors and say, come tell us about spaceborne computer. And once we've discussed what we're able to do with spaceborne computer in an objective, neutral manner, they say, you know, we've been having a similar problem with so-and-so. Can you come help us with that? And so it helps generate business in that aspect of it. Internally, we continue to have the support that we need. We are committed to the 2 to 3 year mission of Spaceborne Computer 2, and we have a lot of optimism about what may come out of it. Spaceborne 1, in retrospect, was a proof of concept. Spaceborne 2, we have a legal agreement that says we're to provide services to partners. And soon, the beginning of 2021, we'll have a very simple submission process for anyone to be able to recommend an experiment on board Spaceborne Computer 2. And so you can obviously see the analogy between that and lead generation. If they're interested in doing something on Spaceborne Computer 2, are they interested in other earthly-based HPE servers? The third area that we've sort of alluded to, and that is proven at space, available on Earth, and that is opening up lots of harsh environments. All of that is on top of all of the Earth-based space business that is seeing that downlink systems are needed, image processing systems are needed, and as the space industry grows, the employment in the Earth-based space industry will grow. And as we said, and our friends at NASA have said recently, nearly everything that we do involves a computer, and HP will be there to support you with that. So thank you.
It's fantastic. It's kind of like the water bears, right? The ones that can survive in any environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Computer.
Yeah.
Christine, I'd love to switch over to you and continue the conversation on jobs. NASA publishes an economic report regularly on how their work could affect the U.S. economy to create jobs, specifically here in the U.S. How do you see the International Space Station, national laboratories, brand partnerships efforts supporting the jobs market in the U.S.?
That's a great question. I think it's commercial partnerships and brands are part of that commercialization. If you start with something that we like to do every year as an example of how there's new sprouts coming up in commercial opportunities, the brand partner is Boeing, and they work with us on Mass Challenge, and Mass Challenge is a business accelerator. And as a matter of fact, this week is the announcement of the winners for Mass Challenge, and every year this Boeing prize, Space in Technology and Space Prize, identifies a number of new potential startups, companies that may not have thought of using space, but in fact have that opportunity. And so it's developing new things that just didn't exist before, leveraging space. An example of one of those is one that I like to talk about, a company called Lambda Vision. And they're making their brand known because of the work that they're doing on a retinal chip. We love this one because the administrator of NASA, Mr. Bridenstine, mentions this one because it's really an easy to understand project. The chip itself is made at a higher quality in a way that cannot be made on Earth. So it will always need to be manufactured in space. Whole new business, manufacturing this retinal chip in space that will then become an eye implant that will improve vision for millions of people on Earth. It's a win from the technology. It's a win for creating a new type of medical procedure that can enhance people's vision, and then the jobs that go with all of that. And then there's the supporting jobs, because you need to continue to have people who can help that implementation and help design how that is manufactured in space. And that brings me to the topic of implementation partners and customer service partners that work with us. there are 10 different companies that have 17 commercial platforms on the International Space Station. That's all new from just a few years ago, where NASA opened up the ability for National Lab to make these things happen. All of those are companies that are prospering and growing and building, and that's continuing to grow as the commercial space use grows. Those companies include companies that develop new kinds of labs in a box like Space Tango, or have external platforms on the station like Alpha Space and Craig Technologies. They all have new business associated with this opening of the commercial space use, International Space Station, movement on into the moon with the Artemis program. And so all of those things are new developments. A lot of them run through International Space Station, and some of them NASA is also developing. So it's really opening up for anybody who says, I really want to work in space, lots of opportunities for those tangential things, like Mark's area. Mark would love to go to space. I would love to go to space. I'm not going to get to go there probably, but we can certainly impact aerospace and have commercial functionality that provides jobs.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Jay, I'm going to switch over to you from a space storytelling and content perspective. How do you demonstrate space content return on investment models to brands or investors? How do you demonstrate to them that they could make money in space from the content and storytelling perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. The ROI for Red Bull Stratos, I don't think anybody really knew. And Red Bull primarily is an energy drink company. Although they operate, they have athletes, they have a Formula One team, they have their own TV station. For them, it's eyeballs. And I think it's this for most brands is the more that their brand is seen as being associated with cool and exciting things, or their logo is associated with something cool and exciting, then they get the eyeballs, people pay attention to them, they end up selling product. So ahead of time, I don't know that it's really that easy to come up with the numbers, and maybe that's something that an ad agency is better equipped to do. But there's no doubt that a brand's participation in a space project is going to garner attention. Like, these things don't just, go unnoticed. There was a ad campaign for Axe deodorant, and their logo was "Nothing beats an astronaut." And it shows a woman on the beach, and there's all these attractive men, but suddenly an astronaut starts walking down the beach in the suit. It's very funny and comical, but who doesn't respect and admire astronauts? And so space is, again, the pinnacle of technological achievement, and any brand that can be a part of that positions themselves as being a leader. Each time we do one of these projects, usually we get a bunch of phone calls and emails afterwards from other brands. And, so we're constantly fielding questions and exploring all kinds of ideas, things that I can't talk about because they haven't been done yet. But, just like Tom Cruise and Doug Liman's, idea to make a movie in space, of course, this is like the natural progression of filmmaking. And, even though Tom Cruise is a huge box office draw, the fact that a film was shot in space is going to be a big deal. And, this will likely be different. There was many amazing IMAX movies that were shot on the station and on the space shuttle. But a cinematographer's never gone to space. And so, the astronauts are trained how these cameras work, and they acquire amazing footage, but you know, there's a push lately for artists to travel to space, and, you know, sending a poet to space will be an amazing thing, you know, to have that kind of thought process, have the observer effect and look down on the earth and then compose, you know, a document. So the filmmaking, the storytelling, it's all, it should all be attractive to every brand, because this is, you know, space is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and anybody that's not getting involved in it, you know, will likely miss the boat. So I don't know what the direct ROI is, but it definitely can't hurt a brand.
Yeah, I think it really is, you know, about how a brand leverages their space program. For example, HP they've like, you know, developed a space program that benefits their business on Earth in a big way. And so and you know, Red Bull probably made money off of that content. So I think it depends on how a brand leverages it. But it is an entirely new ecosystem that seems to be creating a new type of participation in terms of jobs, marketing, and product development and research and development. So I have a list of questions for you, Christine, on a plethora of questions, I should say. First of all, audience members want to know, what should brands and corporations, or maybe even small companies, expect in a partnership with the ISS National Laboratory in regards to process?
Well, you know, I always joke that there's a form for that, and there is a form for that. So, and Mark knows, he's laughing because he knows about the form for that. The best way is to contact us, and we'll explain some of the ins and outs, and we'll surround you with people who are our scientists, our program specialists, the people who work on my team and partnerships, as well as operations people who know how things work. So we'll first of all surround you with people who know how to get this done, so that you're not figuring it out on your own. The next thing is, and we haven't talked about cost, we talked a little bit about that there's a fee for the 5%, but when Congress endowed the ISS National Lab with 50% of the payload for resupply for NASA and 50% of astronaut time, they made it so that researchers do not have to pay for that. So Mark could take a chance and put a computer in space with us, because he didn't have to pay for the rocket fuel up and the rocket trip down and the time for the astronauts to play with the computer. That would make it cost prohibitive, and HP would not have been able to jump in there and put a computer on the station if they had to pay all those costs. So Congress has given us that ability to make those things available. So a small business that wants to try things, or a commercial company that wants to try things, can jump in there without having to figure out how they're going to pay $7 million in rocket costs. So that's part of what we provide. It's hard to navigate NASA. They're a very, very big place with lots of people doing a lot of really important things. So if somebody wanted to do a commercial payload, we can help make those introductions and help get them to the right team inside of NASA to do something that's solely commercial. So we can make those introductions if it's not a research effort. And I'm going to put in one more component. We don't have a lot of grant money at the ISS National Lab, but we have some. And we also have sponsorships from other partners like NSF and NIH and other commercial partners. Target is an example of a company that sponsored research in sustainability with cotton. And so those requests for proposals come out periodically. Get on our mailing list, you'll get the notes, and we're looking for partners who can bring us those projects that can have cost defrayed by sponsored programs. So there are opportunities for those kind of things. And I'm going to put in a plug for Mark, because I know he's looking for people to test drive his computer. So he mentioned that they're going to put out a notice. So if what you have is a computer project, Marcus is looking for partners to try that out. And we have other partners too who are saying, I'm looking to try some things out. So my best suggestion is reach out to us through our website or find me on LinkedIn, and I will get you the form and I will get you started.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. On the 5% payload marketing opportunity, what do you think this is going to inspire brands to jump on board space and participate in space? You know, how could this message be you know, delivered to them that, you know, here's a path to space that's accessible, it's cost effective, and the folks at ISS National Laboratory and NASA are willing to work with you. You know, how do you think that, what's the best way to communicate that to them?
I think it's NASA announced it a year and a half ago, and they actually haven't had a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
I think that actually Estee Lauder has probably done everyone a favor by being one of the early adopters to jump in and getting some press. And I think that some of the press was, I'm just going to be blunt, it's a little unfair that Estee Lauder was somehow using something that wasn't, you know, wasn't the right thing to do. That's exactly what it was made available for. It was made available for a brand to try space at a reasonable price. And so I think that they're early adopters and icebreakers, and hopefully that they'll get some good market stories and good material out of it, and be able to have others say, okay, how can I use that for whatever it is that I want to tell a story about? And as Jay said, look, space is sexy. You know, it's a cool thing. You're the coolest dude in school if you've got some, you know, space connection. And we welcome people being energized by that and finding my job isn't to do the commercial part, but as I've mentioned, so often the commercial thing goes with a research component, and NASA making it possible and breaking down the barriers to use that 5% and making it cost effective is a good thing for attracting the future commercial users and the future marketing for brands in space. It's a good thing.
I think it's a great opportunity. It seems like a no-brainer. Like, you know, space is sexy, and who wouldn't want to?
It's this much little bitty. It is a big capsule with a lot of room. I'm sure they can tuck one little thing in there to put it into space and make for commercial interest in the space program. Because I would say this too. I think. The space station has been up there for 20 years. That means if you're a teenager, it's been there all your life. But accessibility wasn't there. And so it was NASA astronauts taking NASA payloads and very, very scientific things. This really makes a connection. It brings something back to people who are citizens watching what's going on, and the storytelling like Jay does makes it real. And the idea of having a selfie in space, it means people can connect. And if in the United States we want to continue our space program, we have to have the support of the taxpayers and the consumers. And these are the things that help to tell that tale.
Tricia, can I jump in here?
Jump in, please.
So yeah, I want to confirm everything that Christine said, and again, thank her and the ISS and the ISS National Lab. She's absolutely correct. HPE would not have paid the cost to get this payload on board. We do not have the people in the space station to operate this supercomputer and to return it and process all the data. It just would not happen. And she also alluded to Spaceborne Computer 2 and the submission process. This is one of the best collaborations I've ever experienced in my career. We get free delivery via the rocket ships coordinated by ISS National Lab. We get installed and operated by the astronauts, again, free of charge. And in collaboration with ISS National Lab, we're making Spaceborne Computer 2 available to all the brands, quote unquote, if you would, whether they be your university or your high school or your grammar school or your drink product or your film company, etc. And in collaboration, there's no charge for that. So we want to get the most benefit we can out of these experiments, and expanding the number of brands that have been on the ISS is something that we're part of, and in collaboration with Christine and her folks. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Jay, let's switch over to you, and let's talk about this Tom Cruise movie, because you know, a lot of people are talking about it. Do you think that filming a movie in space is going to be more valuable in as far as the content? And do you think that there's going to be a lot of, you know, production companies and directors and so forth that are going to want to film movies in space because of this new, you know, this announcement?
Yeah, you know, there's been huge technological advances in computer generated effects, and you know, shows like The Mandalorian are shot on stages with LED walls. It's certainly easy to fake, you know, the look of space, and look at the movie Gravity as a good example of that. But the fact is, if it can be real, and if a film can be promoted as having been shot in space, that's huge. That's something that a lot of people are going to be attracted to. And, you know, there's always risks involved with going to space. And so I think part of the attraction to a lot of the Mission Impossible films is that Tom does his own stunts. And so a lot of people go just for that reason, to go see, oh, that's not a stunt man on the side of the plane, that's actually him. And so to know that when you're watching this movie that Tom was actually on the station is a big deal. And I think a lot of people are going to be curious to see that, to see the reality. And, you know, I've always kind of maintained that, you know, why fake something if you can do it for real? And so I think it's a really exciting opportunity. You know, these guys are very daring and innovative. Obviously, they're not going to have a full crew up there to support them. It's going to be very small. And so there'll be a lot of multiple hats being worn. But, you know, kudos to them for, you know, having the guts to go ahead and do it. And, you know, this type of thing, when Flightline Films was born, you know, it was based on filmmaking and cinematography, and that type of, the idea of being able to tell stories in space, and have crews that can work in zero gravity, and have production quality, motion picture quality, cameras that can work in an EVA, say. And so, you know, a lot of people have said, you know, we've always kind of been ahead of our time, but things are finally catching up. And, you know, we've seen this rise of private and commercial space endeavors. And, you know, filmmaking is certainly a private endeavor. And, you know, thank goodness that NASA has embraced, you know, the private sector, and has figured out ways to cooperate and to provide services and make the ISS accessible. You know, I think one of the biggest things from a storytelling standpoint is going to be when man finally ventures off to Mars. And, you know, there'll be challenges with that. Will somebody make a movie on Mars? Probably one day, but in the meantime, those first missions will have a lot of live video that comes back, and that should be done in a thoughtful way that really engages viewers and allows them to come as close as they can to experiencing what those astronauts are doing. And, you know, things like what Mark is doing with HP, you know, one of the challenges of that Mars mission is going to be you know, the data rates are very low, and things will probably transition from radio transmission to laser transmission of signals. But the data rates will still be very low, and people are expecting high quality video when they watch something. And so it'll be something like, you know, that HP supercomputer that will allow us to do the processor intensive compression that's needed to get a 4K 60 frame per second signal back from a vehicle that's far, far away.
Mhm.
You know, that's the thing, is that the storytelling is ultimately supported by the technology and by, you know, the this brain power of people to solve problems and to make things happen. And so the days of, you know, engineers just putting cameras around a space vehicle for situational awareness, and that's how we have to watch things, as available light and, you know, an operations camera, those are kind of over now. And, you know, I think the time is right where we can put cameras on these vehicles, where there's been a lot of thought given to the framing and the composition and what we want to communicate. And, you know, so the feature film aspect, you know, that's one of the best executions of storytelling, is that long form narrative where you're telling a story and you have these compelling images that go along with it. You know, the saying in filmmaking is, you know, show it, don't say it. Try to keep the dialogue and the exposition low and tell the story through images. And so there's a great opportunity for Doug Lyman and Tom to, you know, tell this amazing story on the ISS that, you know, that we've never seen before.
Mark, did you have something to add? It seemed like I wasn't sure if you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I love everything he said. Outstanding comments. I think he's picking up on and giving us a perspective from what we call the user community. Rather than the propeller heads like myself and the computer engineers and the geeks who can talk to you about speeds and feeds, et cetera, and how cool it is. He's talking about using it to get the 4K video back to space so that he can support his customer base. And that's what the HPE supercomputer on board the ISS is allowing people to figure out in the early stages. So I appreciate his vision of what can happen. Thank you.
Fantastic. So coincidentally, Jay, like a couple of years ago, I had asked like a famous producer to film something in space. And he directly just said outright to me, he goes, why would I film it in space when I could just do it in a studio? And I think that with this Tom Cruise movie, I think that now, you know, the end user, the viewers, the watchers, we're going to be like, hey, did you shoot that film in space? And if the film wasn't, it's not going to feel as real. I think it's one of the reasons why maybe reality shows, you know, have taken off in the last decade or so, is because they seem a little bit more real. And so, you know, it's almost like, will all these guys that are shooting in a studio, space imaging, will they lose credibility once this film is shot in space? And on that point, you know, what is really the cost difference right now that you can kind of speculate between, you know, shooting something in space versus in a studio? Is it a lot? Is the cost coming down, or you know, what could we expect on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain authenticity to actually filming on the station that will always beat out the idea of faking it. And, you know, the truth is, we know what the budgets are on Hollywood feature films, hundreds of millions of dollars. A lot of that goes to the CGI and the work of all those talented people that are able to create these, you know, fake shots, for lack of a better term, that look so real. But even if you watch the movie Gravity, and they did an amazing job, you know, there's a lot of times where the actors are not floating correctly, and, you know, a lot of the fanboys were quick to point out, you know, a lot of the flaws with the dynamics. And so, you know, filming Tom on the station, this is going to be, he's going to move in the way that people naturally move. The authenticity of it, I think, is going to be a great way for you to just let yourself go in the movie theater, watch this film knowing that he's on the space station and not in the back of your mind analyzing, oh, well, would that really move like that? Is that real? Was there a wire there that was removed? There won't be any of that. I mean, it's reality. You know, this has happened. And so, you know, as far as the cost, I mean, I think probably the highest cost is the seats, you know, to get up there. Even though Crew Dragon is going to be much more affordable than the Soyuz, you still have to get those people up there. And I think that's really the expensive part. Luckily, Christine and her people have made, you know, the time on the station relatively affordable compared to anything else. I mean, that cost is fairly negligible. So right now it's that cost per pound to get things to space, and you know, taking a shoebox of equipment, you know, is not that much, but taking a few people is still pretty pricey. But I think you know, the payoff will be there. You know, whatever it costs to take a crew to the space station to film the first movie there is going to be far outweighed by the notoriety, the press, the media. You know, this is going to be huge.
Yeah, completely agreed. Mark, I want to jump over to you and ask, does Hewlett Packard Enterprise have any upcoming plans for space activities that you can share with us today?
I can in some general terms. We haven't yet officially opened up submissions for Spaceborne Computer 2, so we're really have a list of things that previous experimenters have said, hey, I wish I could do this on your computer. And one of the most exciting ones is modeling and simulation of a Mars lander landing on Mars. And this had a true business benefit. You've got a business manager sitting there saying, we're going to build a Mars lander with people in it, and it will never have landed anywhere. The first time it will land will be on Mars. And oh, by the way, we don't have any pilots that can pilot it. It's going to be landed by computers. And that's the first time the computer software will work. So what if we decouple those? Let's go see if we can have the software work in a real spacecraft in real time, and see if it gives us the right answers. And so we were able to do the modeling and simulation of a Mars lander successfully, Spaceborne Computer 1. That's on the docket for an advanced version of that in Spaceborne Computer 2 as they continue to make that model even better. So that's pretty exciting. Another one that's often talked about that people seem to relate to is onboard gene sequencing, and then the processing of those gene sequences. And that's the technical description of it. The boring one is, hey, what's that mold growing on my potato? And what bug just ate a bit of my lettuce, right? So within Spaceborne Computer 2, you could have all the DNA sequences of all the molds that are available, and you could sample that mold off the potato, and then within a reasonable amount of time know if it's safe to go ahead and make your French fries. Instead of the time and effort to get all that data back to Earth, wait for it to be processed, and then the go, no go to be delivered to you. You know, our friend here, Jay, has mentioned faster image processing, image compression, so you can get that back to the end user / viewer faster. That is also on there. Another one that's kind of interesting is quote unquote weather models. You're living on Mars. You're about 48 minutes away from Earth, and you look out your window and it looks like a tornado of red Mars dust storm is coming to you. You probably don't have time to do that weather model back on Earth. If you have on board an HPE supercomputer, you can run that weather model real fast and decide what type of safety efforts you need to take to survive the sudden and impending storm. So those are a few on the list right now. We've also got, we're very optimistic that we'll have a lot of educational STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math experiments that want to be done. One that got a lot of interest and giggles was we computed the value of pi on Spaceborne Computer on Pi Day, March 14th, 3/14. And so that was kind of cute. And it got people talking about math, talking about the value of pi, relating that to how cool it is in space, etc., and how fast the computers are that we were able to do it on board ISS. So those are a few of them. And I'm most excited about the fact that I don't have any experiments for Spaceborne 2. I've proven out Spaceborne with Spaceborne 1, and now I have a legal document requirement that I have to open it up to partners. And I'm opening it up to the world of imagination of those people and those brands that could do something on Spaceborne Computer 2, and I'm just more excited about that than anything that I can conceive of.
What does that mean? To opening it up to brands, like, is there a portal? Like, is it open source, or how does it work where people can participate?
So that's my politically correct way of saying that we're going to accept submissions from anyone, including competitors. So we are like Switzerland. We're in a no cost, no price agreement with the ISS National Lab. And if your experiment has some benefit to space exploration, to humanity, or to your brand and commercial success, document that and bring it, and we'll try to do the experiment for you.
Yep, and let me put in a word to help Mark here. If you can't find Mark, you can find us, and we will. We have a big old website, right? So either way, either get it to Mark if you have some ideas, or reach out to us, and we'll make the connection with Mark and the HPE people, because we are in our partnership method. We're here to help Mark and the HP team find the right kind of research to run, and that's what we do together. So if you can't find Mark, find us on our website, send us a note, and we'll make sure it gets over to the HPE folks if you have some ideas.
So the experiment would run on the supercomputer.
Yes.
And so it would almost, have to be like a real life challenge or some form of mathematical equation, or what would this look like, as far as, like, what would be an example of something that someone would submit to you?
Jay, believe it or not, came up with the one that we're most asked to do.
Okay.
And it, to us propeller heads and computer scientists, it's really trivial. So many experiments have worked hard with Christine and others to get their experiment on board, and they neglected to think about the downlink rates and how slow they are and how they get interrupted all the time. We've been asked many, many times, could you just compress my data so that I could get it down faster? I did not bring with me the ability to compress my data, whether that's radar imagery, photographic imagery, 4K imagery, camera imagery of other types. If you could just compress it down, then I can get the data faster to me. So that's the one that is most common. Those that have thought about that and realize that, hey, when the data gets back down to my lab or my office or my business, all I'm going to do is run XYZ on it and look at the answers. Well, they're thinking, why don't I get Spaceborne Computer 2 to run that for me and then just give me the answers? And so we've got a lot of folks looking at that. The example I use when I talk to colleges and high schools and university is a lightning study. And you've got high definition cameras taking imagery of lightning studies, and they're running 7x24, but they're only interested in the few minutes or seconds before the lightning strike and the few minutes or seconds after the lightning strike, but they don't know when that occurs until they've downloaded all of that data. Well, I'm sitting on board Spaceborne Computer 2 right next to your cameras, And the software that you use to cull that data to get that very important few seconds or minutes that you're interested in can run on Spaceborne Computer 2 as well as it runs on your computer in your office. Let me do that, and then I'll just compress the results and send them to you. Like I alluded to earlier, we're not about data collection, we're about insight. And to get to that insight, you've got to run a piece of software. Let me do that for you. It benefits you. It benefits the space station. It saves downlink bandwidth from our satellites and opens up that bandlink for other more important folks to use. So those are the first two, data compression and then what we would call post-processing.
I'm like naturally going to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where it's like, what is the meaning of life? And it's like 42.
That was run on an HP computer, of course.
Of course, yes.
I would like to ask you all the same final question, and then potentially go to a few questions we might have. And I'd like to open this question up with a quote from Elon Musk, who is as hot as space is right now. He's quoted as saying, "It's important for us to get to a self-sustaining situation on Mars as soon as possible, because either we're going to become a multi-planet species, a spacefaring civilization, or we're going to be stuck on one planet, Earth, until some eventual extinction event, which you know, could be real at some point." So Christine, I'd love to ask you this question. What role will the ISS National Laboratory have in helping us evolve into a multi-planet species?
That's a great question. I do want to say that I hope we don't have to leave the planet because we've made a mess of it. I'm hoping that knowledge of the planet that's provided by the International Space Station helps us to realize things that we need to correct and make sure that our home planet is in good shape. But with that, the International Space Station acts as a gateway, a stepping stone into those other places, both by having research on them that helps us to have insights about how to get to the moon and how to get to Mars, things like Mark's project are an example, but also the things that they're learning on the space station about inhabiting such a small place, about what needs to be reused. Recycling is a big initiative because you can only take so much up there. There's only so much room. And so loop technology and the way things are manufactured and remanufactured, I think are both going to help Earth, but that's going to help us if we go to other planets, because you're going to take only so much with you and you're going to have to reuse those things. And so those technologies, I think, are very, very interesting as we move off to inhabit other planets.
Jay, I'm going to shoot that question back to you. What role will Flightline Films have in helping us evolve into a multi-planet species?
Yeah, I think, primarily we'll be, one of the documentarians. If you look at the foresight that NASA had during the Apollo program, there was this challenge to land on the moon before the end of the decade, and they had so much to do, but they didn't forget about the cameras. They had live video, they had film. I mean, it's amazing how much material there is that captured these historical events for future generations. And so I try to remind all of our private space customers that they have an obligation to document. This is private space's Mercury and Gemini time. And there's, it's our responsibility to make sure that we document everything so that historians later can look back on these great achievements. I think beyond that, we'll assist with the communications, as people move off planet, we'll want to see what these colonists are doing, and that will motivate others to want to participate. And so we'll be the storytellers of the move off planet.
Beautiful question. Mark, what role will Hewlett-Packard Enterprise have in helping us evolve into a multi-planet species?
That's a really easy one for me in HPE. humans, we hardly do anything that doesn't involve a computer. And we want the latest and greatest computers whenever we're doing anything. If you were allowed to go to Mars and they said, here's your iPhone 1, you'd probably have a heart attack. You want to go with the latest and greatest iPhone 12, or maybe the iPhone 25 by the time we get to hit it to Mars. So with Spaceborne Computer, we are sending up the latest and greatest in technologies. Earth is where our R&D labs are, but the ISS, with the support from Christine and others, they're our beta testers. And so with us doing this beta testing, if you will, on the ISS with Spaceborne Computer 2, we'll be ready to take with you the latest computer technology to the moon and to Mars. So you will be on an equal playing field with your earthbound researchers. And secondly, data that you're going to collect, like the human scientists and engineers on Mars, are on the edge. That's what we refer to now being on Earth. The data and the humans will be on the edge, and HPE computers are designed to operate and compute on the edge, as we're showing now with Spaceborne Computer. So again, proven in space, available on Earth, and soon available on Mars.
That's a great tag. Those are great taglines. Doesn't get any better than that. I'd love to jump into a few audience questions we have. One is, what can you say about professional sports involvement with branding in space? So I think we haven't really touched base at all on as far as how sports can be, relevant to space living.
Well, there's a football on the station, and by the way, that question includes, is that a Pittsburgh Steelers terrible towel behind me? And it is. And there was once a terrible towel floating in the cupola. So there was a Pittsburgh Steeler fan astronaut. So this is not that one, darn it. But I would say there's a football up there. Adidas is an example of testing sports equipment. I think there's also an aspect of how the astronauts are used in testing, because the impact of the station on your physical outcomes is affected by space. So osteoporosis and other kinds of neurodegenerative diseases are actually kind of what happens to astronauts up there. And I know that some companies, including sports companies, are interested in the kinds of research that comes from that. But, to tie back to what Mark said about STEM as well, we've worked with brands, not sports brands per se, but with brands who have done some STEM programs for us. So Nickelodeon did Slime in Space and talked about non-Newtonian physics and had fun with it at the same time. So we're learning about physics can be a fun thing because astronauts are involved. And there have been other STEM challenges like Marvel Comics did with us. So I think there's a brand tie to things that are in space that add value to a student population and get interest. If anybody is watching from the NFL or the NBA or anything else and would like to talk to us about what we could do with their brand and maybe add a STEM component or other research, that's what we're here for.
I would love to see someone surf space, or a sports company go and try to develop a new sport in space that we've never seen before.
Yeah, that would be kind of like Quidditch. I think that there are people who, as astronauts are really athletes. And they have to be in really great condition to be in space and have the impact on their bodies. And they do what are called countermeasures. So that's their workout every day. I can barely get interested in 20 or 30 minutes of workout, and an astronaut's countermeasures can take 2 to 3 hours to keep them in shape every day. And they have done things like run the Boston Marathon from space on the treadmill while the Boston Marathon was going on. So there's some interesting tie-ins, and because the astronauts themselves are sports fans and athletes and have interests, there's some interesting things that the NASA astronauts have done to tie into sports.
Mm, That's fantastic. I think that's about, I think we've answered all the rest of the questions uh, within our questions. If anyone has anything to add, please feel free. Otherwise, I think we'll have a few minutes and we'll sign off and thank you guys and the audience for joining us today. And yeah.
I would just say there's plenty of places for either, brand recognition and marketing, or to add to the STEM question for young people to be involved in things that are space. I mean, as Jay pointed out, there's a whole wave of artistic things that are happening, and Mark pointing out that there's a whole pile of computer science. I love the propeller head thing, Mark. So propeller heads everywhere, unite, come and support aerospace. So whatever it is that you do, whether you're a marketer, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a poet, whatever you do, there is a place in aerospace that can welcome those skill sets. So I think it's an exciting time to be part of the aerospace effort.
Yeah, along those lines, Christine and Tricia, I was thinking that these items that you mentioned, beer and energy drinks and cosmetics and sports are things that make us have a normal life. And we need to start thinking about how can we have a normal life in space, on the moon and on Mars, because we're going to get there. And this is an opportunity where those brands, if you would, those everyday items need to get there first and show that they can be a part of normal life on Earth and elsewhere.
Yeah, I was just going to say, another thing is, I don't know that everybody, maybe not everybody recognizes that there's opportunities for other brands besides the primary brand that takes on an event. For example, Red Bull Stratos, it was their project, but there was a lot of other companies that benefited from that and participated in that. I know we're winding up, if I can just show a piece of a video that is an example of that. I mean, this is that compelling storytelling that I was speaking of earlier.
Awesome view.
Sometimes you have to get up really high. The smaller you are. I'm going home now.
I know we're running out of time, so I'm not going to run the whole video, but that was a Super Bowl commercial that one of our camera partners had put together. And so that project, developed legs and has lived on years later across multiple brands besides Red Bull.
That was awesome. a great video to end our talk today. Thank you so much, Jay, Christine, and Mark. I'm going to hand it over to you, Lexi, and thank you for having us today at Ascend 2020.
Sure, of course. Thank you all. That was just a wonderful session. Really enjoyed it.